Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are a weekly live look at the Canadian Muslim changemakers who are pursuing their passion projects, their talents, their skills to better their communities, to enhance their communities over the past few years. I'm your host, Taha Ghayur, on Canada Today, which airs on Muslim Network TV. In today's show, we are going to be exploring life and struggles of an individual who is making an incredible impact when it comes to enhancing diversity and representation of marginalized communities, and in particular, Black communities, Black Muslim communities in the world of literature and the world of children's literature. And this is something that we do often, as you're aware. We are always about highlighting the success stories in the Canadian Muslim community and highlighting those change makers who are having an impact in their local communities and sometimes global communities as well. Today we have a special guest, a Muslim change maker who comes all the way from Edmonton, West Coast, and we are here to talk to Rahma Mohamed. She is an award-winning author, storyteller, and a public speaker. Rahma is passionate about diversity in children's literature and the power of telling our stories, or your story. Once she became a mother, she self-published children's books to encourage youth to be proud of their uniqueness by celebrating their diversity. She publishes books in response to the lack of diversity for Muslim children's books, and her writings also reflect her own struggles of growing up as an immigrant in Canada. She has been on TEDx as well. She released her first picture book titled Muhimma's Quest in 2017, and her second book, Little Brother for Sale, was released in 2018. Rahma is currently working on publishing more books and developing courses to help aspiring authors to navigate their self-publishing journey. Thanks for being here with us on this Sunday morning, Rahma. Thank you for joining.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Brother Taha, for including me in this amazing program. I'm really happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Well, honor is ours, and we wanted to start off by, you taking us back to when you first came to Canada, as we know, you came at the age of 8. And you discovered the joy of reading, and then you were, quite disappointed in what you're reading. Tell us what actually happened when it comes to your love for reading, and how, first of all, transformed you in your life as you grew up, and what were some of the struggles as you read and you watched and you consumed content around you and media around you. What were some of the struggles and disappointments that you faced?
Okay, so when I arrived in Canada, my family immigrated in Quebec. So when we first arrived, we were put in the French schools. And coming from a country where everyone looks like you and speaks the language that you speak, it was very daunting to come into a country where almost no one looks like you. Like every space that I occupied, I was the only one, or the only other, as I like to refer to. And it was very difficult because I was at an age where I remembered how it was before. And I was very much aware that I am now in a different setting where I stand out, where I didn't stand out before in my home country. So it was very difficult, first of all, the initial shock of it. But it's something that a lot of people do come face when they immigrate to different countries. I'm the eldest of the 7 kids that my parents have. And I think I'm the one that holds the most memories when it comes to that period in my family's history. So I have vivid memories of when we came to Canada and how that felt for me, being put in a school all day long when that wasn't my reality back home. Being put in a school where I didn't understand the teacher. I faced a lot of racism. I faced a lot of things that I really detail in my TEDx talk, where teachers were really, at that time, immigration wasn't prevalent. And especially when we talk about immigration in Quebec. And even right now, we can see the struggles that Black people face and Muslim people face in Quebec, where there's the ban on the hijab. And, just imagine that back when I arrived and immigration just wasn't as welcomed or as known about in Canada. Right. So I faced a lot of prejudice. I faced a lot of struggles where I had instances where teachers were very rude. There's a teacher that actually tied me to a chair just because
Wow.
I couldn't speak the language and I didn't know how to ask for my basic necessities, such as going to the bathroom, right? So you can only imagine the type of struggles I faced during that time. And my whole family, I'm not just going to speak for me, but it was my whole family, where we had left everything behind, where my parents only had each other, where every day we were getting news that such and such relative was being, killed or going into refugee camps. And, it's a lot of a hard time for my community at that time, just because we came from a country that was torn apart with the civil war in Somalia. When it comes to my education, so I stated that, we started schooling in a French school. Very grateful that that happened, because now I am fully bilingual. I actually graduated university in French, and I did all my school in French. So here I am, a testament of my parents' sacrifice, that I am fully bilingual, coming from a child that didn't know the language. I think that's a great achievement. And so when I talk about my love of literature, is I started reading around the age of maybe 9 or 10. And I vividly remember when I for me, it felt like I decoded a system, or I unlocked a hidden world, because I was so adamantly passionate about learning this language and learning to read. And books became something that I clung onto, something that I really treasured. And I think my whole family does that. The love of literature and readings and books is something that's very alive in our household. My parents always encourage reading, so we have that. But unfortunately, when it comes to books and things like that, I never saw myself in any of the books. I think the first book that I kind of identified myself with, even though the character didn't look like me, was Anne of Green Gable, just because of her struggles coming into a place where she felt like an outsider. Some of the things that she describes as being a redhead, and how she was an outsider, she was an orphan, and just some of the things that she talked about, I identified myself with. However, I just never found myself in any of the literature that I was reading. Nothing talked about my struggles as an immigrant child. Nothing talked about my identity as a Black Muslim little girl. And I think that's where it was, is just something that you internalize, but you feel like there's something, a void. And it's just not even just the books, there's also the toys, commercials, movies. Nowhere, I was not in anywhere. And I think even as a child, you internalize that, and you even though there's no messaging saying you're less than, it's just you're not you're not even important enough to be featured. And I think I carried that with me until I became an adult, and I saw the same things in my child. And I think
Mm,
that's one of the things that prompted me to take actions and make sure that I'm making a difference in that space.
mm. Well, thank you for sharing that. This is unfortunately, of course, a painful journey that you probably not only have to live with, but have to talk about on a regular basis. And I, appreciate your courage for not just simply internalizing, of course, um, your experiences, but actually sharing it with the wider world and actually making an impact with your experiences and turning it into something, a force of change. Alhamdulillah, which is beautiful. So let's come to the two books that you have written, and yes, there is you talk about your personal experiences, but then when you had your first child, that's when you had, I guess, some sort of epiphany of sorts, and you said, you know what, let me take my pen in my own hands and writings into my own hands and do something about it. And and then you decided to write these two books. So tell us a bit about the story behind the first book that you wrote, Muhim's Quest, 3 years ago in 2017. What prompted you to actually, hit the pen and the ink on paper, and or maybe the keyboard, and say that, you know what, I'm gonna take charge of my own sort of storytelling now.
Right. Um, I'm so grateful for that story just because I felt that it was an answer to a prayer that I had been making. I think it wasn't more of I'm really glad that this is the space that I'm in right now. And I really see it as advocacy. And I really do see it as me making contribution to the next generation, because books do shape minds and they have the impact to change your mental and the way that you see yourself. And I do see that in the children's that are growing up today with the representation that they do have. However, when it comes to me and my story and how I started, like I mentioned, I noticed that my daughter was going through similar struggles that I have been. And you have to consider that me and her father are both immigrants to Canada. But I have cousins that are now second generation born in Canada. My siblings that were born in Canada have children's now that are born in Canada, but I'm noticing the same type of struggles that I have experienced. And for me, that was shocking, to say the least, because here we are, been in this country for more than 30 years. We've had children. We've graduated from, top universities, and we're hoping that the next generation is going to only do more, right? And now you have children that are still struggling with the lack of representation. And I'm seeing that there is change, but change is so slow and change is so little that there's still major gaps, and especially when it comes to Black Muslim representation, because I do believe that that's a double minority. The fact that I am Black and the fact that I am Muslim, the fact that I choose to wear the hijab, I mean, those are big identities that in of itself are hard to stand for. But the fact that they're all combined together makes it a unique set of circumstances. So when it came to Mihima's quest, I think that the prayer that I have been making to Allah was, oh Allah, give me the ability to make a difference with a set of gifts that you have already provided in me. And I think I was making that prayer over and over and over, because I was, I was the first to graduate from my family. I had a very good job. I had made my parents proud in a lot of the things that I had already achieved, but I felt like I could give more. I felt that I could still do more And I really loved writing as a child, but when you have immigrant parents, letting them know that you wanted to be an author was just not something that they could comprehend.
Mm,
It's not something tangible that they could hold and tell the family back home, my daughter
sure.
is, writer. She wants to major in literature. It's just not something, that they understood. And I completely respect that. And so I still had that in the back of my mind. And I think that Allah is very much cognizant of the dreams that we hold inside of our hearts, even if we've let them go, or we've just kind of put them aside to kind
Mm,
of do practical things. And I have to say that the story of Mahima's quest really just came to me as an inspiration without me really thinking that I was writing a story. So I really feel like it was a gift that was given to me. And soon as I got that inspiration, and the main themes of that story is that it takes a village to raise a child, and the pearls of wisdom that each of that village gives to that child. I feel like we left behind the villages that were helping us raise our children,
mm,
and we've had to reconstruct those villages in foreign lands that perhaps don't have that concept, right? So it was really important. Those themes were really important to me. And when I got that inspiration, I started writing the story. I knew nothing about self-publishing. I knew nothing about publishing world in general, but I knew that I loved stories, and I knew that this story needed to be told. I wrote it within the span of, I think, 3 months. And I just set myself on a path where I learned how to self-publish. And alhamdulillah, within a year, I was able to accomplish that goal.
phenomenal. That's great. Beautiful story. Um, so, coming back to stories and telling stories, why did you choose a story, I guess, writing as a storytelling medium? I mean, in an age of Disney and visuals and movies, action-packed movies, and now, of course, the TikTok generation, that
Right.
at least we complain that at least, or we assume that this generation, whether younger or older, doesn't really read anymore. Why do you think books and stories in written form and and children's literature still is significant in shaping children's identities, children's perceptions about themselves and about the world around us?
Absolutely. I think that literature, first of all, there's a lot of studies out there that shows that the more books that children have access to at a very, very young age, it does shape their minds.
Mm,
And representation of their identities, whether it's, their skin color or their backgrounds or their faith. It has an impact because it lets them know that they are important to be included in stories. And I have seen firsthand how that has changed um, the way that my daughter presents herself into the world. She has gone from a place where she wanted to have blue eye and blonde hair in order to see herself as being beautiful, to then me putting in extra work and a lot of work and making sure that there is diversity in all the mediums that she consumes and not just books, for her to see that change and being confident enough to know that her dark skin and her curly hair is as beautiful as any of the other representation. I think for me choosing to do children's book, that's the place where I felt, first of all, I have to say that I didn't grow up reading children's book, because by the time that I started reading, I felt like I had to catch up. So I was reading chapter books and I was reading, novels and things like that. So that's a big gap of my life that I didn't read children's books, right? I
mm,
come from a world where Somali culture is very oral tradition.
mm,
So I grew up around stories. They weren't written. They were just orally told. We come from a long line of artists and
mm,
poets and singers, but our culture is very oral, so it's not really I don't have children's books or to pass on to my daughter.
mm,
And when I came to Canada, I saw that tradition of passing on classic children's books from the parent to their children, and for them to reminisce on how when they were reading these stories and things like that. And I'm glad to know that now it's the books that are right that are going to be passed on to, you know, my children's, alhamdulillah. But just kind of going back to that, I think that it's important to still cherish that written, the words, but also the fact that they're illustrated.
Mhm.
I think that's a powerful tool to show children that they matter. So for me, in my stories, Mahima's Quest is about a little girl that doesn't celebrate birthdays. And in Islam, we know that some families do and some families don't. I think it's important to kind of even address the fact that there is diversity within our own communities and our own faith, and even the way that we practice our faith
Mhm.
is diverse and it's different. And but reinforcing the fact that one person is not doing it wrong or the other person is right, but really just kind of celebrating the fact that we do things differently. And I think it
Mhm.
was important for me to showcase that. And you know, I just wanted to feature Black Muslim children. The main character, she doesn't have a hijab because I wanted to showcase that she's Black and she has these big curly hairs. And I wanted a child to pick up the book and see themselves. And I get a lot of reaction where kids are like, oh, she looks exactly like me. And I think
Mhm.
there's power in that. And I think that's why it's so important to still cherish and invest in children's literature.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So, when it comes to literature and creative arts, do you feel the current landscape has changed to better connect Black Canadians and Black Muslims with support and resources to relay and tell their stories through books and other creative means? I mean, are you seeing a shift of any sort in the publishing industry, or not just publishing industry, but even other platforms and other places where stories are told, whether it's in libraries or schools, or of course, TV or any other medium? Do you think more and more diverse stories of racialized people, especially involving Muslims, are being told, or are you one of those lone fighters when it comes to at least telling stories of your sort?
I don't think I'm a lone fighter at all. I think there's many, many creatives that are Muslim, that are, whether they're Black, people of color, different backgrounds. There's not a lack of creatives out there. Is there a lack of representation, a lack of access to different opportunities? Absolutely.
Mm,
Right. There's so many of us that are, qualified, passionate, that are doing amazing work, whether it's in literature, whether it's in movie production or creation of TV shows or graphics or anything like that. It's just a lack of opportunity. And when I talk about, just the space that I am very well versed in publication, there is this big gatekeepers when it comes to publication, because the
mm,
reason why I chose self-publishing, and I make it known that I did not fall back on self-publishing. Self-publishing was a choice that I made just because I didn't want to be delayed in terms of kind of meeting these kind of gatekeepers and being chosen or waiting to be chosen. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with going the traditional route. It's actually much easier, but the truth is, it takes a long time, many, many, many years. A lot of authors out there that are Muslims or just any other type of authors will tell you that it took them years to get an agent. And after getting that agent, it took them another many years to get a publication. And even when your book is picked up and you got a book deal, it takes another couple of years for that book to be published and to go onto our bookshelves. I think people don't understand the struggles that authors go through in order to get those books on those bookshelves, and how many years it actually takes an author to get to that level. Is there still a lack of representation for Muslim authors, Black Muslim authors, Black authors? Yes, there's still a major gap. There are studies out there that show that there is more books on shelves with main characters being animals than those of, Black characters. That's an actual fact. there. So it's not the fact that there isn't enough creatives. It's just that it's very difficult to make it through these systems that at the end of the day are still riddled with biases
Mm,
and prejudice, and where most of those spaces are still very white.
mm,
So it's very difficult to pierce through that. But I do see that there is a push now. There is some representation. Is there still lack of it? Are we there? Did we make it? Absolutely not. But are we making slow progress? I have hope that we are still seeing slow progress now with the movement of the Black Lives Matter. There has been even a little bit more awareness. That's what I call it. It's just awareness.
mhm,
And these white spaces are now having difficult conversation and acknowledging the fact that there is still a lack of diversity in their spaces, and what can they do to rectify that, and having a little bit more opportunities come our way, which I hope that it's going to make a difference along as we go.
inshallah. And I mean, there's so many questions that I still have to ask you because and there's so many angles to our conversation. But let's talk about first the self-publishing industry. So you chose that route because, as you mentioned, um, you didn't want to go through the gatekeepers. You didn't want to be told change this and do it in our terms. You want to do it on your terms. But also, of course, the idea that it may take ages for you to get the word out, and that sense of urgency was there for you. So you decided to help other self-publishing other authors now to self-publish their books, and you started your own, I guess, a business to help those new aspiring authors to, help them in their journey. Tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to do that.
So I mean, I talk a lot about self-publishing being a choice for me because, like I said, it's very difficult to get traditionally published. And I also didn't, when you get traditionally published, you have editors that are overseeing your work, and like you mentioned, will have rightfully opinions because they do buy the rights to your work. So they will direct you whether you should change this or change that, make it marketable, because at the end of the day, it is a business. They want to make sure that they get something that's going to sell. So it's you have to make that decision. Is it easy to self-publish? No, it's not, because you have to do the work that you would have a team to do. You have to make the decisions, you have to hire, you have to invest, you have to do the marketing, you have to do everything that you would have got perhaps assistance with. You have to do one of the hardest things to accept about self-publishing is the fact that you don't unfortunately have access to the spaces that a traditionally book would have access to. So unfortunately, unless you have connections to local schools, your book is not going to be picked up and going to be seen in the libraries of schools. Your book is probably not going to be in Indigo or Chapters, or your book is not going to be, featured in places that you normally would buy books. But it is up to you, and it's still very possible for you to go ahead and make those connections and market yourself and make your book available in places that you can have it featured.
Mm,
I wanted to give the opportunity to other people to self-publish books if that's what they wanted to do. I want to also emphasize the fact that our children deserve quality work. I don't want children to pick up self-published books, and that's one of the biggest misconception, is that self-published work is just subpart to
mm,
traditionally books. I want our children especially, that are hungry for representation, to pick up books that are beautifully illustrated,
mm,
beautifully written, and have access to that and say, this book was written about my community and it's just as great as the book that I got from the library. I believe that in Islam, we have to strive for ihsan. And it's very important that anything that you choose to do, you do with the utmost possible excellence that you can. And so from the things that I've learned, the mistakes that I've made in the 3 to 4 years that I have been publishing, I want to pass that on, because I didn't find a mentor at the time when I was coming up to help me navigate the space and to make my work as great as it could be. I've made mistakes that cost me a lot of money just because I was doing trial and errors.
Mm.
And I want to give opportunity and mentorship to authors that want to go ahead and publish their works. And if they want to do traditionally published, that's great. We just want to make sure that there is representation. At the end of the day, my goal is for our children and their children to have representation, and these stories to be written, passed down. We have so many stories to tell, and I think it's important. One of the first commandments in Islam is to read. So in order to read, we need to have material to read, and it's important to have quality material. And inshallah, I'm just hoping that more authors are going to be able to get their stories out there, whether it's self-published, traditionally published. It's just the matter of writing those stories.
Well, that's a very noble mission, actually. I mean, you're connecting back to the whole, first command of Revelation, Iqra itself. So that's inspirational. How was your reaction? How was the community's reaction to the book? The books, in fact, both books that you have published so far, within the Muslim community and the Black, Canadian community and Black Muslim community, Somali diaspora, as well as the wider community. What was your reaction? What was their reaction? And also, were there any negative feedback? Was there any negative feedback? Was there any backlash, or was it really really well received by the wider community, as well as let's say the Canadian Muslim community and the African Muslim community?
I think that the books were received very well. I got a lot of positive reviews, whether it comes to, having them. I have them on my website as well as on Amazon. And the books have, in the books, the family, it looks like my family, even though I never mentioned that they're from Somalia or anything like that. But anyone that is from the Somali culture will know that the influences that are there are very much within the Somali families and culture and things like that, right? Locally, I got really great, within my community, I got really great feedback. I reached a lot of readers in the US as well. Just their population is way, more significant than in Canada. And, I had great reviews from even just African American families that were able to see, a different type of stories, that when it comes to Muslims and Black, but at the end of the day, that we're just all kind of just experiencing the same type of stories, and that we have the same kind of, family dynamics. And especially when it comes to a little brother for sale, a little sister that wants to sell her brothers, that dynamics can happen in any community, right? In anything. So I think it was important for me to also write stories where Black Muslim families are just portrayed as being normal, having normal lives. And I think that aspect was very, very well received. I don't believe that I got any negative feedback in terms of the books themselves, or that's if people didn't connect with the story or things like that. Overall, very, very positive when it comes to even people that weren't even Muslims, people that weren't Black, but just leaving with learning something, because I think a lot of people weren't even aware that there are people that didn't celebrate birthdays. And at the end of the day, it's about celebrating and loving each other, regardless of how you choose to celebrate. And I think a lot of teachers also said, we didn't even know that was the thing, but now we're going to be a little bit more conscious in our students as to say, if you don't celebrate this way, it's okay. And what else could we celebrate with you? And I think that's the positive message that we should leave with,
What were some of the, I would say, more satisfying and gratifying comments that you heard or stories you may have heard, whether it's from a story from within the Muslim community, or some other conversation outside of the Muslim community. What were some of the things, moments that made you feel that you were having an impact? I mean, I think you just shared one right there, that teacher was able to recognize that there are different ways of celebrating all sorts of things out there, and we should be cognizant of it. But are there any other stories that made you feel that what, you are having an impact here?
I think the greatest impact for me is when I do school visits. So I
Mm.
do a lot of school visits for Reading Week here in Alberta, where it's around the beginning of October. And anytime I do school readings, little girls will just come around me and they will recognize the fact that I am Somali, and they will just come and be like, "Oh, are you Somali?" And they will just cling on to me. And for me, it's just seeing myself through them, what an impact that could have had on my life and my journey if I had had an author, someone that looked exactly like me, someone that was telling stories from my community. What an impact that could have had. And for me, it always gives me chills to kind of think about that, the impact of that representation, not only a representation that you see through the books, but the representation of me meeting these little students, these little children, and just for them to see themselves. And if some of them, they don't identify with me because I am Somali, it's the fact that I am a girl. It's the fact that I am Black. It's the fact that, I look like them. And that is one of the biggest things that always fill me up with hope and always give me that extra boost to keep going, because I know for a fact that I am making a difference. Because each time I do a school visit, I let them know that their story matters, that they should continue to learn, continue to read, and to most importantly write down their stories, and that they also have the power to tell their own stories. I think that's one of the biggest impacts that I see very regularly. Now it's like nowadays I can't do that aspect, so
Mm.
I do like Skype visits and things like that, but it's still one of the most rewarding part of this journey.
Beautiful. And I wanted to also ask about, were there any, you did mention you did not have mentors in this field of writing necessarily, for probably various reasons, but were there any inspirational people in your life, people who either inspired you or maybe nudged you to either write or tell your own story, take charge of your narrative, or they were just good supporters, whether in the family or outside? I mean, were there any, or even other authors out there that you decided to sort of either follow their lead or just were inspired by?
I think when I started writing, I didn't know anybody, so I was very new to the space. But there are definitely Muslim authors out there that I really admire, and one of them is Asma Hussein, who is in Toronto.
Mm.
She has a publishing house where she publishes a lot of stories. One of the first books that I actually bought was her first book. Where it featured a Somali family, and was called Bismillah Soup. And I thought that was just amazing, because here was another author writing children's books that featured Black Muslim children, and she has amazing books out there. And just the fact that she strives in this space with such integrity and such passion and devotion has always inspired me. Another author that I really respect her work is Sister S.K. Ali, who's also in Toronto. And what I love about her writing is that she features Muslim characters, and she writes YA, is Muslim characters that are not fighting with their identity of being Muslims. It's just us experiencing things as humans. It has nothing, because there is this big stigma when it comes to Muslim characters, is that they want an up and coming story. And when it comes to, and when I'm talking about that, I mean in the traditionally published books,
Mm,
is they would feature a lot of stories where the characters are just kind of struggling with their identity, and at
mhm,
the end it's whether they continue to being Muslims or they leave that behind to be more of whatever else that they were dealing with. And what I love about SK Ali's books, and her mission is to feature Muslim characters and stories that are centered and that are not having that duality, that are just existing, and that goes beyond that. And that's really what I love. And so many other Muslim authors out there that are right now coming, and this community that we have kind of created, and that are just kind of boosting each other. And each time that I see that a Muslim author has got a book deal or a self-published book that's coming out, it's another way for us to celebrate, because at the end of the day,
mhm.
my thing is, what is impact is that going to have on our children's, or the bookshelves need to have as much representation as possible. So when any of us win, I see that as a collective win, because it's benefiting our children and the future generations that's coming.
Awesome. Um, I have a couple more questions as we conclude. I wanted to talk about the impact of your stories in the current climate of, sadly, a climate that is filled with stories about police brutality, of anti-Black racism, filled with really sad stories of what Black people in general, and of course Black Muslims in particular, and sometimes on top of that, maybe a female, and maybe another layer of identity and obstacle being maybe mental health issue, for instance, that they suffer with. What impact do you see your stories will have, and has, in fact, I would say, on the current, on the narrative, which is very negative in the current climate?
I think all stories is a tool to humanize people. So we need to humanize our stories and ourselves. I think if people were more aware of our humanity, and the fact that we are real people, I think that would lessen some of the things that just people are doing without really any thought. I mean, at the end of the day, it's these things are happening because there are systematic tools of oppressions that are still very much active, whether it's in Canada or whether it's in the US. These systems need to be dismantled in order for this something new to be reborn, and that's a fact. Like, I think a lot of people are protesting the fact that these systems exist, and I think that people are just more aware of the fact that this is an actual thing that is happening. But I think the what storytelling does, it humanizes peoples. It connects us on a basis where we can all kind of relate, because even though I am different from you, the fact that I am perhaps Black, the fact that I'm wearing a veil, you don't know what it is to be like me. But if I talk about my sadness, if I talk about having children, if I talk about being a parent, you can perhaps relate to that experience. And at the end of the day, me sharing my story makes you perhaps realize the fact that I'm also a human being that is also, having a human experience in this world. Also, children's books, they have two things that they can do. There's what we talk about, the fact of being either mirrors or windows. So being a mirror to a child that needs to see themselves in these stories, and being windows to other people for them to see the stories of other people, just having that reality. And I think for me, that's what I try to do, is with children's books, is the fact that you're also targeting the parents, as the parent is choosing that book for the most precious thing that they have in this world, their children, but they're also learning along with them. The fact that they're teaching their children, you know what, these families are different from us. I'm hoping that that also imparts onto them, and that just makes us more real, and it just connects us on a human basis. And I hope that that's the type of legacy and that type of impact that these anybody's telling their stories having on the world.
I mean, what I love about hearing from you all this about what you're doing is you're using the power of pen to not only, you know, being a mirror, but also, as you said, you're being a window. And I love that analogy that you just used. And that really opens doors to, you know, unlimited opportunities for advocacy for causes that matter to you and matter to us as a community. And you don't know where this may take you. And I wonder, where is this taking you? Are you, you know, sort of, are you aware where you're going with now your storytelling passion? I mean, what's next for Rahma, and what's next for, you know, the self-publishing legacy and all the publishing sort of plans you have next?
Well, I'm actually very excited to announce that. Well, I did actually say, but throughout this whole experience, like I said, with the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of the events that I did, I was able to actually find an agent. And Alhamdulillah, it was just something that happened organically. Something that, because there are books, I've always wanted to continue self-publishing. I had really saw myself continuing just in that space. However, I wrote a story that kind of goes outside of the things that I normally would self-publish. And a few years ago, I started looking slowly for an agent, and never really happened. I kind of just let that go, continued on my project. But I believe with the combination of what is going on right now and certain things that are being just kind of prioritized in this space and time, I was able to be heard by the right person, I guess, and I was able to find an agent. So inshallah, in the future, I hope to also traditionally publish certain books. I believe that that's something that's going to be really great for me, because it's going to just bring more awareness to the other works that I also do. But also, I see it as an opportunity for me to have greater reach and greater impact, because I'm very much aware that as hard as I can work as a self-published author, it is something that I do on the side. I do have a full-time job, and just the fact of being traditionally published gives you that type of authority, and it gives you that reach, like that I talked about, the fact that my books will be available at, you know, a lot of local vendors and libraries, and just a tremendous amount of reach. And with that, I just still want to advocate for the type of storytelling that I do. I still plan on advocating for the representation of Black Muslim children or characters. And inshallah, that is something that I'm extremely proud of, because as I said, it's very difficult to kind of make it into that space. So I'm extremely you know, grateful for that. And when it comes to my other ventures of the self-publishing, I just want to hope that I, you know, encourage as many authors or empower them and give them the knowledge and the tools and the things that they need in order to also succeed. And inshallah, I hope to do this full-time. Right now, it's just kind of like a part-time, like maybe like not even a part-time, because I also am a mother of 3 children. I work full-time, alhamdulillah, like, you know, so many things. But inshallah, I hope that I'm going to be able to dedicate more time to it and just do more, inshallah.
A lot of stuff on your plate, mashallah. That's amazing. So we have a couple of minutes left. I want to end with, I guess, 2 or 3 questions, but very quick ones, 1 minute each.
Okay.
I want to ask you if there was some advice you were to give to an aspiring writer who wants to do exactly what you're doing, in a sense that they want to tell their stories because they don't see themselves being represented, or maybe their stories are just not being told, what would be maybe top 3 pieces of advice you would give them to get started?
I would first of all say write your stories. Be consistent in your writing of the story. Do not research anything when it comes to publishing or anything like that, because you will get overwhelmed and you might want to give up. So I would say focus on the writing. Focus writing, and also read as much as you can. The more you read, the more you are going to become a stronger writer, just because of that influence of great literature. If you don't have the time to read, I would suggest audiobooks. They're a great thing, especially for a busy parent like me, on the go, in the car, anytime exercising is just amazing. So there's great writing out there. You must consume great writing in order to be a great writer. And before anything, just focus on your writing.
Beautiful. That's great. What would be the top 3 lessons from your experience, your life experience, that you would like to share with others? I mean, your struggles, anything you learned from your struggles and your life, your family. What would be those top 3 things you would like to share with us?
I think you have one of the biggest things my mom would always say is, if there's a will, there's a way. So if you just have to be, you have to persevere. And I think that was one of the biggest things in my life. I just kept going. There's so many obstacles, but I kept going. Another thing is incorporating the love of making dua into your life. That should be part of your business plan. That should be part of your daily routine. Include Allah in your decision makings. Make frequent du'as throughout your life. He has greater plans for you than you have for yourself. And have integrity. Have integrity in the things that you're doing and who you are, and be unapologetic of who you are and your identity.
Awesome. Last but not least, if people want to learn more about your books, purchase your books, or even learn about your, the legacy, self-publishing legacy project, how can they do that? Do they go to a website? Do they contact you? What would be the best way to learn more and perhaps purchase your books?
So my books are on sale on my website, alhamdulillah.rahmaroda.com. You can I'm the most active on Instagram at Rahmaroda, but I have the same handle for all social medias handles. If you go to my social media IG, you will have access to my other page where I want to connect with potential authors. Also through my email, rahmaroda@gmail.com. I'm always interested about hearing about authors and how I can help them and set them up, and just give advice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, your courage, your perseverance with this success story, and many, inshallah, success stories to come with the work you're doing. So we wanted to thank you for being here today and inspiring us all.
Jazakallah khair. I just want to give thanks to your whole team, just bringing awareness of these type of stories and these people, just connecting us that there are a great community in Canada making a difference. So Jazakallah khair, and I pray that Allah puts barakah in that effort for you guys.
Ameen. Jazakumullah khair, and thank you very much. And once again, folks, this is Canada Today show. You're watching another inspiring episode of Muslim Changemaker, and you were listening to the story of a person who came at the age of 8 as a refugee, struggled with language, struggled with discrimination, struggled with all sorts of issues of identity, but grew up and came from a culture that was primarily oral culture, and yet grew up to be a phenomenal writer, and not just a writer, but a writer who is influencing young minds in a positive way and telling stories so that either we could become mirrors or windows, and at the end, essentially advocating for the people, for advocating for the most marginalized communities and racialized communities in our world, unfortunately. So once again, thank you, for listening and tuning in, everybody, today. And also wanted to thank Dawanet and Canada Muslims and TorontoMuslim.com for the marketing partnership. And also, of course, our wonderful team of producers, including Saliha, as well as Aisha and Fatima. Thank you for your wonderful efforts of producing Canada Today show. This is Taha Ghayur on Canada Today. Hope to see you very soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.